There is no reason why we should change our tune when it comes to Avery Johnson.
You are Locked On Kansas State, your daily podcast on the Kansas State Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Christian Rauh, and thank you so much for making Locked On Kansas State your first listen every single day. Welcome back to my everydayers. Got a great show for you today, middle of the week, getting ready for North Dakota. And I'm going to tell you exactly why you should continue to believe in Avery Johnson and why his Heisman Trophy dark horse candidate process, his narrative should continue. There should still be a narrative that he can be in New York when the season's over. Then we're going to do a little deep dive into the linebackers from Dublin, maybe a little bit of conversation, maybe a little bit of concern overall on there. And there was an award that popped out for, of course, one of the best linebackers in the country. We'll talk about that. And then we're going to end the show on possibly a concern about a historical trend after losing in Dublin and what that might mean for Chris Klieman and the Kansas State Wildcats. Hit that subscribe button as we continue to grow right here on the Locked On Kansas State. Avery Johnson is still a Heisman Trophy, a dark horse candidate. End, stop, period. Stop the show, move on, rate 5 stars, and let's get on with our day. Now, that's 100% true. Just because he lost this football game, just because Kansas State lost the football game, wasn't Avery Johnson that lost this game. Just because Kansas State lost week 0 against Iowa State does not change the fact that Avery Johnson is still one of the best quarterbacks in college football. It's a true fact, folks. That's it. I don't make the rules. I just tell you exactly how the facts sit. One thing you got to be excited about with Avery Johnson, when you come out with this, look at his stats or go back and watch this game, which I've done about 2.5 times now. I watched the full replay the other night and then dug into some highlights very heavily just last night. Avery didn't let up a single turnover, him himself. Of course, you had the muff punt by Dylan Edwards and you had the fumble by Joe Jackson, but he didn't do anything that was going to hurt this offense. You didn't see that last season at the beginning of the year when they played UT Martin. He threw an interception. You didn't see that when they played BYU, the first loss of the season. He threw 2 interceptions. And he threw for 270-something yards in this game, 273 and 2 touchdowns. That's something that he didn't do until his 5th game of the season last year against Oklahoma State. This was his second best ever behind the Kansas game last year. The West Virginia game last year where he threw 298 and 3 touchdowns. That is his best game on record, West Virginia's game last year. But you're starting at a higher level. The ceiling has risen, and so has the floor for Avery Johnson. That alone should tell you that you're in a good spot. Last year, you started the season, of course, against an FCS team, UT Martin, with 2 touchdowns and an interception, only 153 yards passing, only 37 yards rushing. I know we're definitely batting an eye right now saying Avery Johnson didn't run the ball enough. He only got 21 yards. And I do agree with that. They do need to give the ball to Avery Johnson more, especially if Dylan Edwards is not in the picture. Now, we're probably not going to see that happen this Saturday against North Dakota. We're probably not going to see a lot of Avery Johnson, period, against North Dakota. We're probably going to see some of those other quarterbacks, which that's exciting in itself. Who's going to be the true quarterback number 2 for this roster for the rest of the season? But the fact that he didn't throw any turnovers and really didn't make any mental mistakes with the exception of a questionable intentional grounding call gives you hope, gives you lots of hope about Avery Johnson for the future. Was he the best quarterback of the weekend? No. And honestly, you got to probably give that to Daniels from Kansas. He was great. He was consistent. He was fantastic. I think he was the better quarterback in this game. Rauh made some good throws, but I think Avery Johnson had a great game. He's a 300-yard passer if Jared Bradley catches that 4th down. If they get back on the field, in the fourth quarter, if the defense can stop them, he might be a 350-yard passer, or that running game might be different. Of course, this is a whole could have, should have, would have conversation. I completely understand that. But one thing is for certain, that Avery Johnson is still in consideration to be one of the best quarterbacks and one of the best players in college football when the year is over. He did nothing in this loss to jeopardize that. He is still easily considered a Heisman Trophy candidate. Just because you get the loss here doesn't change that for Avery Johnson. If you disagree or you agree with me, let me know in the comment description below. I really want to know your thoughts on this, because some people are saying that they're not impressed with Avery Johnson. They're not impressed with his second best, highest career passing yards in 273, because most of those passing plays or passing yards were broken plays. You still scored 2 touchdowns against a very good Iowa State defense, a very good Iowa State secondary that was number 1 in pass defense in the Big 12 last year. And although they did lose some to the NFL, just like Kansas State did, it sounds like they're going to be just fine, and they're going to be another good secondary in the Big 12 this year. Avery Johnson did that on Saturday in terrible conditions. And most of that 273 yards came in the second half when conditions got a little better. Imagine if this game was played with a healthy Dylan Edwards and with conditions that were not a monsoon. You wouldn't be even batting an eye. You wouldn't be looking on social media. You wouldn't be listening to some of these reports when it comes out from some of these college newspapers or college blogs or whatever you want to say. And some of them are questioning the play call of Avery Johnson. I just don't see it. I just don't see it right now. Call me a homer, call me whatever you want on this case, but I don't see how you can shift any of this blame to Avery Johnson. He didn't get the 4th down. Okay, that's on the 30-yard line. That changed the entire landscape of the fourth quarter. He should have been able to run 3 more yards. You can make that decision if you want to decide it on the coaching, or if you want to decide on Avery Johnson for that blame. If that's where you're pointing it at, then okay. But it still hasn't changed the thought process in my mind that Avery Johnson is one of the best players in college football heading into this year, and I'm not going to be shocked. And I can't wait for some of these comments that are on Locked On Kansas State these days talking about it, and everywhere else when I look at Kansas State content. I can't wait to the end of the season where he's being considered or being flown out to New York. And I'll be the first to say, I told you so. I'm not usually that petty, but Avery Johnson might make me do that. It very well might make me do that. He had a great first start to his season. First great start to the campaign for 2025. And it only makes you wonder how great it's going to be when he has a healthy Dylan Edwards. When those receivers that just came in the portal, Jared Tibbs, Jaron Bradley, are healthy. Or I shouldn't say healthy, are more in tune. I was thinking healthy because my thought process was going towards a guy like Lincoln Cure. Chris Kleiman on Monday said that he thinks the tight end room is thin. The only player in that position group that was missing on Saturday was Lincoln Cure. So it sounds like, if you peel back the layers a little bit, that I think he's going to be utilized a lot more when he's finally healthy. And that's another electric player on the field for Avery Johnson to utilize. And the fact that he was able to throw his second highest career yards in passing, 273 and 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, 0 fumbles. Again, maybe the only boneheaded move was an intentional grounding call. There was a couple pass plays in the first half when the weather conditions were terrible that they were a little bit slightly behind the receivers, but the receivers got their hands on them. And there's an old rule in football that coaches always say. I heard it when I was growing up. I heard it in watching NFL as a kid growing up. They always said it. If the wide receiver can get their hands on it, then it's a catchable ball. So you be the judge of that one. But either way, I do not think Avery Johnson you should worry about him at all. I think that you have a great quarterback under center, or in the shotgun, might I add, because he's not under center. That's actually probably one of the biggest concerns on that 4th down call at the 30-yard line. Should have been under center. Should have ran the tush push, right? Should have made that happen. But I think you're in great hands. I think Kansas State is going to be just fine, and Avery Johnson is going to shock the system. Things I continue to say all offseason, it's going to happen, and it's going to continue with probably just the first half on Saturday And then we're going to see him in Army in Arizona and then a Big 12 play. The fact that they get to play this type of non-conference schedule that kind of puts them out of the limelight for the next 2 to 3 weeks might be the best thing that's ever happened to Kansas State. And then when they can turn around and start the true Big 12 play, once it's finally the back half of their schedule, UCF, Baylor, all that stuff, Avery's going to be primed and ready, and hopefully he's got a healthy offense surrounding him. Let's dive into the linebacking crew next, because I've seen a couple comments on the channel talking about the linebacking crew, and I want to kind of squash something that is going on in those comments. And of course, there's an award already passed out to the greatest linebacker in college football. We'll do that next right here on Locked On Kansas State. But first, today is the day, August 26th. It's officially FanDuel's Futures Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours right now, it's less than 24 hours when you're listening to this show, FanDuel's giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling for the MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or ready to crown your Super Bowl champ before week 1 even kicks off, this is your moment, folks. So check it out. I mean, if you want to take a flyer on the MVP, crown your champion in August, or you could even throw in with these future bets a parlay on all the division winners, go all 8 of them. Do it. Be bold. This is the day to be bold. August 26th. FanDuel's Futures Day. So visit the FanDuel app today. Start planning your futures bet now, because today, Futures Day, is one day and one day only. FanDuel, play your game. There's a conversation about the linebacking crew that I have to squash real quick. And of course, there's some talks about the linebacking crew when you immediately think Austin Romaine. And Austin Romaine was electric, was fantastic on Saturday in Dublin, and already seeing some awards and some things nodded his direction. I'll get to that in just a minute. But the other portion of it is, should Desmond Purnell be the other guy next to Austin Romaine, or should it be somebody else, like, for example, Gabe Powers coming in the portal? So I want to dig into that on this conversation, on this segment today on Locked On Kansas State. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. We're going every single day, most likely twice a day, Monday through Friday during football season. So be sure to do that and hang out with me every single day here on the channel. Desmond Purnell had a great game when you look at the advanced statistics of PFF being one of them. For the most part, coverage was something that was a very good thing on Desmond Purnell's behalf. He actually was one of the best, if not the best, when it comes to coverage grade on the entire defense, beat out the entire secondary. And that's mainly just for the fact of the type of targets that he took. Some of his numbers are skewed, and you're actually going to see this happen a lot when you look at single game results. Things are skewed. When you start looking at a bigger picture, then you get more of an idea. I dig into PFF grades, not because I use that for an entire thing, or that's my entire mindscape, but I just like to see what the data is seeing other than my eye test. I thought Purnell had a great game. I thought there was 1 or 2 plays where he could have made a play and he didn't, especially in the run game. He did miss a premier missed tackle that I thought was a huge miss, and that was his only missed tackle, according to the advanced data. But other than that, I thought he played a good game. And the premium stats from PFF kind of helped me solidify that as well. Overall, he had a 66.1 defensive grade. That's like kind of in the middle towards the upper tier for the entire defense. He played 64 of the 75 snaps. I believe that was the 3rd most on the entire team behind BJ Payne and Zayshawn Rich. Put that in perspective, Austin Romaine only played 61, so he played 3 more snaps than Austin Romaine. But where it came into an issue here was his run defense and his tackling. Now, the tackling grade, if you will, and this is, again, PFF stats here, and this is why it gets skewed. The tackling grade is low. It's only a 40.2, and that does sound really low. Think of like test scores when you're in high school or college. That's kind of how you would rank these when you're looking at colors, right? 65 passing kind of thing. 80s, 70s are really good, though, in this landscape. It's not just a B or a C in the scheme of things. But Desmond Purnell had a 40 tackling grade and only a 47.2 rush defense. The rush defense is concerning because he does play in the box most of the time, Most of his snaps were in the box. I believe out of the 64, it did say that like 50-something snaps were inside the box. So that's obviously a concern for a linebacker not to be having good grades against the run. But the tackling, I'm not too worried about because he only made 2 tackles. One of them were missed. So you have a 50% miss tackle rate. And of course, that's going to make that grade go down lower. But the running defense, the rush defense, and tackling of Desmond Purnell is something that we're going to have to keep a look at later on this season as the season progresses, and hopefully that doesn't happen. He's one of the greatest pass rushers on the team when he gets there, and that always continues to be a high note for him. Shows that in his PFF stats as well. But the rush defense is something of a concern. Pass rush and coverage, though, you're getting from a linebacker like Purnell. That's almost like a unicorn when you're getting good coverage and good pass rush. You just got to get that run stuff down. And that's actually where Gabe Powers comes in quite well. You put the two together, you have probably another awesome Romaine on the team. Gabe Powers, he only played 26 snaps in this one, but his rush defense and his tackling were some of the best on the entire squad. He was the second best linebacker behind Austin Romaine when it came to rush defense, running defense, if you will. Austin Romaine's stats are absolutely insane, and he actually won PFF Defensive Player of the Week for entire Week 0. For all the games that were played, he was Defensive Player of the Week and, of course, named to the all Week 0 team. The only other defensive player that was from Kansas State that was added to that was Toby, who, of course, had a couple sacks, and he played very good, and his pass rush numbers were absolutely insane. Gabe Powers, good run defense. His tackling numbers were very high as well, but his coverage was pretty low. So you put those two together and they make one good Austin Romaine. So where do you go from here, right? Do you make Purnell play more snaps? Do you start adding more snaps to Gabe Powers? Obviously, you got Rex Van Wyf in there as well. Yeah, I know the depth chart has them in different directions, especially with the new depth chart that just came out that they're no longer going to play the 3-man front. They're moving to the 4-man front. That's something that changed on Monday, and the depth chart is on social media. They just dropped that just this week. Really no changes for the record on that, but other than that portion of the changing of the 3-man front to the 4-man front. I think you got to still continue to play Desmond Purnell. I think he is the linebacker that has proven it. I think there's maybe a little bit of over concern, maybe a overreaction to what happened against Iowa State. I think some of his, when I went back and watched this again, some of his mishaps happened in that fourth quarter where the front defensive line was gassed and a lot of things were getting to that second level and he wasn't capitalizing on. Now, obviously, that's a huge concern if your defensive line isn't stepping up and then your second level is not either. But, I mean, that's kind of an excuse. I'm not here to make them, but that is kind of something that you could put into play there. And then, of course, Gabe Powers is still learning the system, I would assume. He got here in the spring. He's new. He's not Desmond Purnell. He's not a guy who's been there next to Austin Romaine for the last couple seasons. I think you're going to start seeing a little bit more snaps, maybe more shared from Gabe Powers. I don't know if that takes anything from Purnell, though, because Purnell had more snaps than Austin Romaine. I think you just continue to see a little bit more upgrade from Gabe Powers because he proved it that he has what it takes to be on the field and to make an impact for Kansas State. What will be exciting is what the snap share looks like against North Dakota. Because, of course, I'm assuming that we are going to only play our starters for the most part in the first half, especially when you're looking like Avery Johnson and things like that. The defense might be a little different. This whole new roster size cut down that's only 105 players might change that as well. You might have some defensive players playing a little deeper into the game because just of roster size. This is a perfect game, the only FCS game, so this is a perfect time to play some of your freshmen that you still plan on redshirting because you only get a certain amount of games they can play before they have to burn that red shirt. Or no longer eligible for the red shirt. So I don't know if we're going to get that answer right away this week of, will Gabe Powers get more snaps? Will Desmond Purnell get a lower level of snaps and percentage of when they are actually playing? Because I think those answers are true. I think that will happen. But I don't think that's going to answer our question this week. Either way, I think the linebacking crew is in great position. When I see some of these comments that we need to play Powers over Purnell, I think that's a great problem to have. I think we're nitpicking something of 1A, 1B, personally. That's where my mindset goes here when I'm thinking of the linebackers. If you think I'm wrong, you let me know in the comment description below. I want to hear that conversation, and I want to chime in with you as well. I want to dig more into this linebacking conversation in later days, and hopefully we get to talk more about some of the younger guys after Saturday's contest against North Dakota. But next, I want to talk about a historic trend, because when you lose in Dublin over the last couple seasons, it doesn't end well for the entire season. How can Chris Kleiman get out of that? That's the biggest question. We're going to try and talk about that and figure it out next, right here on Locked On Kansas State. But first, this episode of Locked On Kansas State is brought to you by Rauh. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis and maybe even tried them. But if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rauh Ready. Rauh Ready is a next prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal, brain, and boost blood flow, unlike the usual pills that you can take in hours. The Rauh 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue, kicks in fast, and on average in 15 minutes, and those effects can last up to 36 hours. So you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. I love that it's completely online. You can connect with a board certified doctor and show up discreetly at your door. So head to Raugiet.com/LockedOnCollege and use code LockedOnCollege to get 15% off today. Raugiet.com/LockedOnCollege for 15% off with promo code LockedOnCollege. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit the Raugiet website for full safety information. What if I told you that every team since this Dublin thing started back up in 2022 that lost didn't make a bowl game? Would that hurt your feelings? Would that make you nervous? Would that throw up some red flags for Kansas State? That is what has actually happened since 2022. Nebraska, Navy, and Florida State didn't get the 6 wins after losing in Dublin. Now, we can dig into these details and, of course, look into it. But what does Chris Kleiman have to make sure happens to make sure that doesn't happen? And 6 wins is still obviously not enough. Like, we're a Big 12 contender here, and I still stand firm that we are. But a historical trend is a historical trend. And if you believe in that kind of stuff, that's a concerning historical trend that you don't want to continue. You want to break that trend this season. You want to make sure that that's never the case again, where people go to Ireland next year, TCU, North Carolina, whoever loses that game. They don't want to have that in their mind because Kansas State took care of that. That's no longer a thing. That's the mindset that Chris Kleiman's got to carry this season. I don't think this team is anywhere near a 6-win team. They're going to be at the very bottom, and I know that's something this hurts feelings of most when they hear this, but at the very bottom, this team is an 8-4 squad. I don't think they're 8-4. I think they're a lot better this year. They get to 9-3 or 10-2. That happens. You know, my prediction at the beginning of the season was 10-2. However, I did have the Iowa State game as a win. So now my prediction is 9-3 and 10-2. I mean, I think that's a fair assumption, right? But I do think this team gets back to Arlington, so I'm still leaning on that 10-2 side. They find a way to make it up against the Baylor team that I did have as a potential loss, or Utah as I had as a potential loss. They find a way to win one of those and continue to stay 7-2 in the conference and get themselves to Arlington. There's a lot of thought process here, though, when you look at it, and we're going to dive deep in here about these teams that lost in Dublin over the years. Is this really something you should be concerned about? You know, Nebraska, the first team, they lost to Northwestern and then went off and had, a 4-8 season. They fired their coach, Scott Frost. The entire new Nebraska dynasty has changed now with Matt Rule in there. Oh, and might I add, their second week of the season, Nebraska is probably the closest one you want to pay attention to, not because of the coach on the hot seat or anything, but the second week of the season, week 1, I guess, their second game of the season, they played North Dakota, the exact same team we're playing, and they only won 38-17. It was tied at 7 at halftime. It was tied at 17 almost heading into the fourth quarter. I think there was just a few minutes left in the third quarter when Nebraska finally started taking over, and they won 38-17. They went 14-0, 14-0 in the fourth quarter. But for the first 3 quarters, this thing was basically squared at 17. And again, 7-7 at halftime. So they started off slow, and I think if you've listened to this show, if you're an everyday, you've heard that, when you get back from Dublin, it's not always the easiest path, especially against an FCS opponent. This is the exhibit that I'm telling you, Exhibit A, Nebraska versus North Dakota Fighting Hawks, 38-17 in 2022. This slow start for Nebraska eventually ended up making Scott Frost lose his job. And now he's in UCF, and we're going to see Scott Frost this season as our Big 12 second opener when we restart Big 12 play later on this season. The other game that happened, and Nebraska wasn't a team that you were expecting to be nails in 2022 for the record. Scott Frost was on the hot seat. Navy lost to Notre Dame 42-3 and then wound up being 5-7 on the season. They lost to Army that year, 17-11. They had some other losses as well. They were just fine the second week, though. Although they got creamed by Notre Dame, they beat their FCS opponent, Wagner, 24-0 the next week. It's hard to take a service academy as an example here, comparing Kansas State to a service academy, especially a 5-7 Navy team in 2023. But it continues the trend. And then, of course, last year, probably the most surprising team in the last decade was Florida State. You were just missing out of the college football playoffs last year after going undefeated, the whole Jordan Travis saga. And then you go to Dublin to take on Georgia Tech. And, I think that's was one of the best games in Dublin. You could make the comparison, which one was better, the Georgia Tech Florida State game or the one we just played, Kansas State Iowa State. But a 24-21 loss, Georgia Tech over Florida State. And then they fell to 2-10. Going from 13-0 and just missing the college football playoffs when they shouldn't have missed the playoffs to going 2-10 was insane for Mike Norvell and his Florida State Seminoles. Their only wins were a 14-9 win against Cal and a 41-7 win against Charleston Southern, their FCS school. They only had one FBS win on the season last year. So what does Chris Kleiman have to do to make sure this doesn't happen? Well, you have to take care of your FCS opponent on Saturday, of course, and you can't overlook anything. Leave the overlooking for us, for the media, to look ahead. As the coaching and the staff and the roster, you got to be focused and you got to be trimmed in for every single game on the schedule. You can't overlook North Dakota. You can't overlook Army or Arizona, although you think Arizona, even though it's a non-conference game, you think Arizona is going to finish towards the bottom of the Big 12. I also think UCF is going to finish towards the bottom of the Big 12. I think Scott Frost eventually is going to get that team there. I just don't think they're ready yet. But that's your next four on the schedule. You got to be 4-1 heading into Baylor. You have to. And if you do that, win or lose in Baylor, I think you're still in a good spot. Even if you wind up losing in Baylor and you get your second loss in Baylor in the conference, you look at the rest of the schedule, if it's another close loss in Baylor, like it was in Iowa State, you can run the rest of the conference table. You can do it. And you can be 7-2 and you can win a tiebreaker as long as that tiebreaker is not against Iowa State or Baylor, and you can find yourself in Arlington. I think that's the worst case scenario right now, personally. Losing that early, your second loss, and then knowing you got to run the table, it's absolutely doable. I think that's the worst case scenario. Another fun thing here as well, although they did beat lose to Iowa State in Dublin, they're still seen, according to ESPN's Football Power Index, as a team that is going to go farther this season. When you look at the Football Power Index, they're still seen as a team that's going to go, according to them, 8-4 is their projection, but they're still considered a higher percentage to win the conference over Iowa State, still a higher percentage to make the college football playoffs over Iowa State, and still one to be higher in the projections overall. Their Football Power Index is still ranked higher than Iowa State, which I found a little funny. Take that what you will. ESPN Power Ranking is a little different, but either way. So there you have it. Can they beat the trend? Can you make sure you don't go 5-7? I don't think we're going to get there. But historical trends, if you're one of those people that think historical trends are a thing, then that's one we have to beat this season. Hey, look, we have a listener survey coming up. It's a very important request. Locked On wants to hear from you. We're putting together a survey to learn more from the listeners, make your favorite podcast like your Locked On Kansas State even better. This is your chance to tell us exactly what you like, what you don't, and answer questions about our advertisers. So head to lockedonpodcast.com/survey. I'm also got it in the show notes below if you're listening on audio and YouTube. And complete that survey, if you will. If you complete that survey, you'll be entered for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Amazon gift cards. So check that out today. Let me know all your thoughts in the comment description below. What do you think of Avery Johnson? What do you think of these historical trends and that linebacker conversation? What do you think of Purnell and Gabe Powers? And then, of course, our best player on the roster, Austin Romaine. We'll be back here later this afternoon. We're switching mind focus. We're going to go look and dive a little deeper into North Dakota for the first time. Our first look at North Dakota and what that means heading into Saturday's game. We'll do that this afternoon's bonus edition of Locked On Kansas State. But until then, please like the video, please subscribe, and we'll see you here next time, right here on Locked On Kansas State.